Hi, Tri-State. Happy Friday. Welcome to Facebook Live Friday. We have a really special Facebook Live today because Donnie Lester and Andy Bradford are here to answer any of your questions about hazmat, and they're also going to go over several things regarding hazmat as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to flip it on over to them. Okay. Guys are ready to roll?
Thanks, Riley. I'm Donnie Lester, the Vice President of Safety for Tri-State, and I've got Andy with me here. So we were anticipating on having some hazmat questions shot in early, but we do not have any, so I want to hit some subject matters that I think are important that you need to know about, and the first two is the up-and-coming roadside inspections. So July the 14th through July the 20th is called Operation Safe Driver Week, and basically the Department of Transportation will be focused on driver behavior. So they're going to be looking at speed for one thing, and then they're going to be looking at lane changes and anything that would do with a driver's behavior. They're also going to be looking for ill or fatigued drivers. So again, July the 14th through the 20th, be on your A game. Another one that's coming up is Brake Safety Week, and that will be September the 15th through the 21st, and we'll be doing some updates to that. We'll be sending you messages prior to the Operation Safe Driver Week and prior to the Brake Safety Week to let you know exactly when it's taking place again. And they'll be doing the full-blown inspections, and in 2018 they actually had 14.1% of their inspections were out-of-service inspections. So on Brake Safety Week, September 15th through the 21st, be ready for that. So again, that's just a couple of the up-and-coming roadside inspections that DOT will be doing this year. They've already done the 72-hour blitz. I haven't seen the results from it yet. But I do know in 2018 they had a lot of out-of-service violations, something to the tune of 36,000 out-of-service violations. So be ready for that. And speaking of out-of-service violations, takes us into the CSA. I want to mention just a little bit about the CSA as far as unsafe driving. The unsafe driving part of the CSA encompasses speeding tickets or failure to obey traffic control device. We're not really getting speeding tickets out on the interstate where the speed limit's 70 or 75 or whatever. What's happening is we come into the city limits of these small towns and the speed limit drops to 35 or 45, and we're coasting into these towns, and there's the city police officer sitting there waiting on you. So again, this one ticket really affects our CSA score on unsafe driving. So again, watch your speed in these small towns, watch your speed in the rural area, watch your speed coming into even the cities, the big cities, whenever you're going around them on the bypasses, the speed limit changes, so you have to be mindful of that. Another area that I want to mention briefly is the hours of service area, and Andy will talk more about that here in a minute, but that's another area that we're seeing a trend go up a little bit. Another area is the hazmat trend, and on the hazmat trend, basically we're seeing the same thing. It's placarding violations, and we'll hit on that here in a minute, and shipping paper availability and placement in the vehicle, and some shipping paper issues as well. So anyway, at this time I'm going to turn it over to Andy to talk to you a little bit about hours of service.
Okay, so as he said, our hours of service CSA score has been on the rise, which, as most of you drivers can probably agree with us, that's confusing with us being on electronic logs. So there's three things that we're getting cited on recently, and the biggest one, and it's just that the drivers lose track of it, or maybe they get complacent on where it is, and that's where your DOT quick reference card is. We give this to you 3 different times in orientation. Of course, if you're an existing driver, it's going to be, not only do we give it in orientation, we also put it in your green permit book.
Right.
It's also going to be in your driver's manual. In your driver's manual, tab 6 is going to be your hours of service. Okay. So the second thing that we get citations on that's making our CSA scores go up in hours of service is not having either a blank logbook or having blank log pages on your truck with you. Again, if you don't have a blank logbook, it's okay. You can pick one up at the truck stop, or if you're around Joplin, we've got them here at Joplin. Just stop by and see Leah Groom. She'll give you one. But if you're in a pinch, even in your driver's manual in tab 6, we've given you up to 10 blank log pages there. So all you have to do is show the DOT officer that blank log page, because that's all they're wanting to see. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is whenever, for hours of service, whenever you become the active driver and you're about to take off, make sure in that hours of service tab, not only in the hours of service that you're the one that's going on drive duty, but make sure you've got that green dot, that you've gone into your log screen button, the login button, and actually become the active driver. Because just a few instances we've been caught where we've accidentally been on the other co-driver's logs, and that's a pretty big CSA violation. Okay. So.
Okay, as we continue on talking about hours of service, that was good information that Andy gave you. You know, DOT ruling says we have to be switched over to ELDs by the end of the year, so we're going to be starting that transitioning pretty soon, and we'll probably have some hiccups that we'll have to be dealing with. Leah will be very instrumental in working us through them. There's a few changes but between the AOBRDs versus the ELDs. So right now some of you are running the enhanced AOBRDs, which is a lot closer to the ELDs than just the plain AOBRDs. So again, once we start this transitioning, hopefully in a month or so, then we'll be getting information out to you on what to expect and what to look for, because things are going to change as far as driving time and personal conveyance. So we will get that information out to you when time comes. So anyway, that's probably enough about hours of service. As Andy said, if you're driving a truck, make sure it shows you as the driver, you know. So that way we can avoid any issues at the scales. Also, form and manner, make sure you put all the required information on your logs that's required to be on there to avoid the form and manner violations. Okay, Andy, shipping papers. So give us some tips on shipping papers.
Yep. The next thing we're going to talk about is shipping papers and a few tips that we've had. Of course, your shipping papers normally goes into the hazmat CSA violations. Some of the things we've been cited for recently is just shipping paper accessibility, which seems to be an odd one to be able to get, because you think automatically they're already in the door of my truck or they're within my reach whenever I'm driving the truck, but that's not the only thing that covers. It also covers that your hazmat shipping papers be on the top. So we've got two different types of manifest that we see on a regular basis. We see a lot of GBOLs, and if you've been on government freight and you've got a GBOL, you guys probably realize that front page is more of a cover sheet. It doesn't have any real information about your hazmat on there. So our advice to you is fold that front page back. Okay? That way you can see the shipping description on the very front page that you would be grabbing a hold of as soon as you grab it. The second one that I like to talk about is we haul a lot of Dyna Nobel freight. Okay? They're a great customer, but Dyna Nobel, they're really good about giving them to you in an envelope, and it's even nice and labeled as hazardous material shipping papers. But one of the complications there is they like to put a cover sheet in front of the bills. Okay? The problem with that is now your hazmat shipping papers aren't on the top of your manifest. So my advice would be to you, just take that cover sheet out, maybe put it in the very back. That way, again, you would see a shipping description on the very top of that stack. The third thing I'm going to talk about for that is Haz Waste Manifest. We understand we've got a lot of Haz Waste Manifest. On average, you're running between 20 and 50 pages. So it's easy whenever you're going through those that you may accidentally have one that's got all non-RCRA, non-DOT regulated materials on it. So there's no hazmat on that bill. That bill would need to be in the bottom of your stack. Okay? All hazardous material shipping papers need to be on the top, and that non-hazmat one, just throw it on the very bottom of your stack. Okay? And the last thing I'll touch on that with is talking about waste. Make sure you're calling into your driver manager or operations so we can do that Haz Waste checklist. We're still having a lot of issues out there where loads are being either dropped on a yard or trying to be delivered, and the actual manifest hasn't been signed in the appropriate place, or maybe the shipper certification isn't signed, and that can be a pretty big problem out there on the interstate. So let's make sure we're calling in and getting those haz waste checklists actually done by our driver manager, so we're all in compliance and we know we're doing it the right way.
A couple more tips I want to talk about on the hazardous waste manifest is Andy mentioned the non-RCRA, non-DOT. However, sometimes we'll have a hazardous waste manifest that says non-RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act. That's who regulates hazardous waste. So it may be non-RCRA, meaning it's not hazardous waste, but it still may need to be properly described by DOT because it is a hazardous material. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you'll see non-RCRA, but then it'll be properly described according to the shipping description of the material. So keep that in mind. And another issue that we see popping up every once in a while that I get phone calls about is we'll see hazardous waste listed on a bill of lading. So why does that happen? Well, it happens because the generator is a conditionally exempt small quantity generator. So in other words, they do not have an EPA ID number assigned to them. They're only going to be generating so much waste per month, and it's a very limited amount. But they actually are exempt from using a hazardous waste manifest. So whenever you look at the EPID information for the generator, it'll simply say conditionally exempt small quantity generator, or it'll be abbreviated as such. So anyway, that's just a couple more tips. One thing I want to mention on the Emergency Response Guidebook, the 2016, is as far as availability and placement in the vehicle. We've had a couple of write-ups here recently where the DOT officer asked the driver, let me see your emergency response guidebook, and they couldn't find it. Well, according to the regulations, availability and placement is the same as shipping papers. So, Andy mentioned on the shipping papers, whenever you're driving, it must be within reach while restrained by your seat device. That's where your shipping papers must be. Doesn't say it has to be on the pouch on the driver's door until you get out of the truck. Once you get out of the truck, then that's one of two places where you can leave your shipping papers. Pouch on the driver's door or driver's seat. Either one of those two places. Okay, talking about hazmat, Andy, give us some tips on placarding.
Okay, so placarding. One of our biggest things that we have a problem with for placarding is our haz waste customers give us a piece of paper called a total tally sheet or a total load inventory sheet. I always stress in class that is one of the most dangerous pieces of paper to be able to placard off of. Okay, the problem with that is you are putting all of your knowledge and trust into that haz waste customer.
Right.
And you hate to do that. And the problem with that is they're almost never correct. So the big thing is you need to be adding up your weight so you can be able to placard off of your own weights. Okay. We have a placarding worksheet for that. There's a master copy of it in your driver's manual in tab 7. If you want extra copies of that, you can always drop by in Joplin. I'll give you as many as I've got printed up. If you don't know how to use that yet and you're in Joplin, you can always swing by the driver's lounge, catch me or Jake Dooling, and we will be more than happy to run through it with you. It's a very useful and very valuable tool. Okay, so adding up your own numbers is a big thing. Next one is most of the loads that we do, especially for haz waste, are mixed loads. Okay, and one of our biggest issues is a lot of your customers out there, they'll either try to placard every single hazard class, or maybe they'll just try to placard everything that's over 1,001 pounds.
Right.
Well, the rules are a little bit different for a mixed load, as most of you guys know. You've got to placard all of your bulk separately, and then you've got to add up all of your non-bulk weights. Okay, so then your non-bulk weights, you have to ask if you have any Table 1 materials, and then any Table 1 materials on that trailer need to be placarded by itself. Okay, then you ask yourself, do you have 2,205 pounds or more of any single hazard class from Table 2 loaded at a single location? If you do, then that hazard class needs to be placarded on its own. Then your last step, you always ask, do I have 2 or more Table 2 materials with a combined weight of 1,001 pounds or more? And if you do, you need to run the dangerous placard to cover your remaining hazard classes. Okay, so that's kind of your steps for placarding again, just in case you need a little refresher on it. The last one is if you're on, this is a regulation we're running into on a regular basis, and we're getting a lot of calls about it. Because drivers will call in and say, hey, I've got a whole entire load of drums. They're not bulk packages, but they're still making me run the ID number. What's going on with that? And so the rule that they're using for that is if you have one single product, one single ID number on the entire trailer, and that weight is over 8,820 pounds. It's what we call the 8820 rule. Okay? If it's over 8,820 pounds or more of that one single ID number, and it's the only thing billed out on that trailer, you have to run it on a bulk placard as if it was bulk. Okay? So that's our main placarding things. Again, if you need some help with that or just want a refresher, always stop by and see Jake or I. Okay, we're more than happy to run through something with you.
Okay, also to add to the 88 pound rule that we have is, as Andy said, that's for the single hazard class, and nothing else in the trailer has or non-has. So keep that in mind, has or non-has. If there's something else in the trailer, you do not have to display that ID number. You simply display the placard for that specific hazard class, and you're good to go. So keep that in mind. Okay, hey Andy, what about PCB markings? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so PCB markings. We've had some controversy over the PCB markings in the past. We have a lot of people out there that are peel and sticking them straight to the side of that trailer, which is a really big maintenance issue at this point in time. Because as a lot of you drivers know, once you peel and stick that to the side of the trailer, it does not come back off. Okay? So our advice, and Tri-State's trained it this way for many, many times, many years now, you can take that PCB sticker, peel and stick it to the back of an old placard, and then slide it into a placard holder. That way you've got it on the side of your trailer, but you didn't have to peel and stick it to the trailer itself. There's been some controversy where drivers are trying to say that that is a violation for placarding. I'm not 100% sure on where all that's coming from, but just clear, cut, and dry. It's not a violation to put that PCB sticker on the back of your placard and slide it in a placard holder. Another thing that I've had a question on in the past is all my PCBs are solid, so they're not giving me my PCB sticker. And the reason that is your regulated amount of PCBs is 45 kilograms of PCBs in a liquid phase in a concentration to 50 to 500 parts per million, or one or more transformers. So the regulated amount is liquid. So there's a possibility that if all of your PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, are solid, they won't give you the markings for your trailer. And that's the purpose. It's not a regulated amount. So that's kind of some tips on PCBs.
Very good. All right, let's talk about guard duty. I get phone calls often asking about guard duty. So anytime you're picking up a government shipment that's got TPS services, it has to be guarded. It doesn't matter if it's a 1.1 through 1.5 or if it's even an FAK load with government services on it and it requires guard, then we have to guard it. So pretty well cut and dry on government freight, has to be guarded. Now whenever we talk about commercial explosives, the only thing that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Reg addresses on that is 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. And it says that it must be guarded as long as you park it in compliance with all the regulations, the 300 feet and all that. So what about the 1.4 and 1.5 and 1.6? The regulations does not state that it has to be guarded. Now what we say is we encourage you to guard it. I know sometimes we move that type of commodity with solo drivers and you have to take a break, and that's fine, you're legal to do that, but we still ask that you stay with the truck as much as possible. So, but the regulations does not require us to guard the 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 commercial explosives. If it's government, it has to be guarded. Okay, that's kind of it. We're going to wrap it up. Now we're open for questions.
Okay, we have one from Jason Matthews. He says, what do we do if a customer calls the fire department hazmat squad because of the smelly contaminated trailers?
I would advise us, give us a phone call, call myself, call Andy, call your driver manager, advise us what's going on. Then we can in turn make contact with the customer and see what we need to do.
All right, the next one is from Ed Griffin. He says, do we leave placards in place when hauling an empty tanker that hasn't been washed out?
That's a fantastic question.
Yes, it is.
The way I explain tankers, and tankers is not a big, huge business that we're in, our special project and stuff, that's why all these questions are popping up. But the way that I explain tankers is if you have a residue at all in a bulk package, you have to have up your bulk placard. Okay? So because you're running an empty tanker, as long as it's got that empty residue still sitting in the bottom of the trailer, you still have to run it as if it's bulk. Another thing that I always explain to the drivers that are on that, if you're on a tanker, you need one of two pieces of paper in your door all the time if you are hooked to a tanker. Either one of those pieces of paper would be the bill of lading, or if you're empty, it can be the residue last contained. If you are empty and clean, you need to have your empty clean out ticket in the door of your truck. Right. Because either way, whether you are loaded with a residue in there or if you are clean, if you get pulled over, you're going to be asked for one of those two things. So if you're on a tanker, you have to have at least a piece of paper in your door saying one of those two options.
Just to reiterate on that a little bit, if what you can do is you can take your manifest or your shipping paper that you delivered the product on and add to it residue last contained and go wherever you're going with the tanker, and you're perfectly legal to do that.
Okay, Juan Salinas has 3 questions. Wow. The first one is, during the rainy season, what's the best way to try and keep placards from flying off or getting torn up?
Okay, so I train in orientation every week. Especially for placarding. Of course, if you're able to use a placard holder, that's fantastic. But the problem is placard holders won't hold them in by themselves. If you're in Wyoming in the wind is going to steal your placards from you. If you're in a rainstorm, the rain and the wind will steal your placards from you. So my advice is always use some extra securement, some clear tape on those placards, even if they're in a placard holder. A couple pieces of clear tape on that placard holder will hold that placard in there a little bit better. And you don't have to tape the entire placard holder. Okay, you can use a couple of different methods. I've got some drivers that like to take a piece of tape and they'll run it from all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. So it's holding it to the bars and the corners. I've got some drivers that just take 2 pieces of clear tape and they'll tape them just to the bars. Okay, either of those methods work out pretty good. I had a driver just a couple of weeks ago told me he takes 2 pieces of clear tape, and on whichever side is the front side of the placard, he'll just tape the 2 arrow part of it, because that's where the wind's going to be coming from. But just a couple of pieces of clear tape can save you a lot of headache from losing a placard out there on the road.
Okay, his next question is a follow-up to that. Where is the best place to get replacements?
That's a good question, because used to you get replacements at truck stops, but anymore the truck stops very seldom ever have the placards that you need. They'll carry the flammable placards and that's about it, or maybe the flammable gas placard and that's about it. So if you run into that situation, what we've done in the past is we'll get you into a truck stop and we'll overnight placards to you. You know, that's the best we can do. You know, it may detain you a little bit from getting your load delivered on time, but it's much better than going on down the road and getting an out of service violation. And then we have to overnight the placards to you anyway at the scale house. So again, you know, we'll get you to a safe parking spot where you can wait, where we can overnight the placards to you.
And as we tell everybody, it's not a bad idea to collect placards in your truck. Most of our drivers that have been here for a while, they've got a milk crate on their truck, and when they take placards off of the trailer and they're still in good condition, they'll file them away in that little milk crate. That's a really good option. You can always ask your customer for a couple of extra placards. They're only required to give you the ones that you needed, so they're only required to give you 4, but most of our customers are nice and they'll give you 1 or 2 extras, so save those for that rainy day. But that's my biggest thing. Just call in too. A lot of times it just, you and I can kind of spitball, or you and Donnie can spitball, and sometimes you'll be able to take one flip placard off and change it to the one you needed, and maybe you had one that you used for a slide in on your truck or something. So sometimes just an extra pair of eyes or ears on it can help as well.
Okay, and his third question is, will we ever be asked to label barrels by a client, and if so, do we label the barrels not really knowing what is in them?
And the answer to that is you will be asked, possibly, sometimes, but do not label the drums. That's not our responsibility to label the drums when we're picking them up. That is the generator's responsibility or the shipper's responsibility. So if you get in a situation like that, please give us a phone call. Call Andy or call myself. We will in turn call the customer to find out where the field rep's at for them to label the drums. So The drums should have the labels on them. The only time that we would be required to label the drums if we're transporting them and in transit a label falls off, then we'd be required to put that label back on that drum. But as far as picking them up out in the field, no, we are not going to put the labels on the drums. Give us a call.
Okay, the last question I have so far is from Richard Clary, and he says, what is PCB?
Polychlorinated biphenyls is PCB, and it's a cooling agent that years ago they put it in transformers to keep the transformers from getting extremely hot and blowing up, basically. So it's a cooling agent. They no longer use polychlorinated biphenyls in a transformer. They use mineral water or mineral spirits in transformers now. So most of your PCBs, the regulated PCBs, have been destroyed, but there's still a few transformers out there that we move ever so often, or capacitors or resistors or whatever that's got PCBs in them to take to incineration.
And whenever you're looking at your shipping papers, it won't actually say PCBs on there. The proper shipping name for PCBs is that big, long, wonderful name, polychlorinated biphenyls solid or polychlorinated biphenyls liquid. So you're not looking for the letters PCBs on your shipping papers. That's what they put on the marking that goes on the outside of the trailer. But on your shipping papers, it'll have the long name of polychlorinated biphenyls.
And it is regulated by TSCA. It's not regulated by RCRA. It's regulated by TSCA because they consider it a carcinogenic agent. So that's why it's regulated, is because they consider it carcinogenic. So again, sometimes you'll see it shipped as a material instead of a waste, and that's the reason.
And we don't have any more questions, so
Okay.
thank you guys.
Drive safe.